we will proceed with the first speaker, which is Professor Ricard Huerta from the Valencia University, and he will tell us about the Silk Museum in Valencia and the exhibition on silk museums. He's awarded 45 minutes. I will have to be very strict with time. So, good morning. Buongiorno, bonjour. Good morning. First of all, I would like to say thank you to the participants, to the MUVIM, to Vicente Genovés, president of the Silk Art Museum School, Germán Navarro Espina, coordinator of the scientific committee of the Silk Museum, to all the technical team from the Silk Museum, to the rest of the speakers, to the institution, and everyone who has cooperated in the organization of this international congress. So, the analysis of the Silk Museum in Valencia that I'm going to talk to you about today is based on decades of university research. It's been focused on museums and direct knowledge of so many museum institutions and the shared work with different teams from national and international museums, specifically regarding musealization, heritage, education, and training of museum educators. I've been able to see from closely the evolution of the Silk Art School in Valencia, and I have been seeing the several improvements. The headquarters of this college, this historical building. So the slides are not working, I'm sorry. So this building has changed enormously, has lots of improvements, and has had the support of the funding of the Hortensia Herrero Foundation. This recovery and restoration of the many artistic elements, especially tiles and paintings, has placed the Silk Museum of Valencia at the core of a movement to recover the historical tradition which is so relevant for our land. We are talking about an historical and cultural referent which is very important for our city. Any decision we make here will have an impact in Valencia, but also globally. The fact that our Silk Museum is organizing an international congress for silk museums places us at global level, and it has been thanks to the support of such important organizations such as ICOM, INSI, or Valencia Tourism Organization. We have to be aware that this challenge is quite a responsibility because we are going to host a congress for many institutions coming from several countries. I'm awfully sorry, but the slide seems not to be working. You will excuse me, I will go on talking, and afterwards I will scroll through them. We can see what it is happening at global level, so we can make strategic plans. We think that it is very important to go to the future through innovation and research, also with dissemination, visibility, economic projection, tourism, and social cohesion. Some years ago, we saw for the first time the concept of migrant heritage, and this is the transfer of ideas, people, trade, and culture. It is a concept which is very suitable for the topic we are talking about today, because it has to do with the possibility of connecting faraway heritages. In the book Migrant Heritage, we find the quote, Silk roads as cultural ways, exhibitions and museology. The author is Germán Navarro Espinac, and it has a lot to do with the Congress 2 days, together with the exhibition and the conferences we are organizing. And please try to imagine ICOM logo. That would be the image we would have here. As per the state, as per the bylaws of ICOM, which were approved in the 22nd General Assembly in Vienna in 2007, a museum is a non-profit permanent institution in the service of society. Okay, here we have the images and its development. Open to the public, which acquires, preserves, researches, communicates, and exhibits the tangible and intangible heritage of humanity, environment for the purposes of education, study, and enjoyment. So please take into account that these images correspond to what I said before. This definition, which is ICOM definition, it's a reference for all the world museums. After the General Conference of ICOM in Milan in 2016, a permanent committee was appointed to study and improve that definition. That committee has the aim of offering a critical perspective on the current definition within the international framework, combining the dialogue between the members of ICON and the work of experts worldwide. This committee tries to study the new environment, society, opportunities, and so on for museums. A new definition will be sent to the ICOM during the General Conference in 2019 in Kyoto, as the professor was mentioning before. Every amendment which is proposed will be focusing on challenges of our world. We consider that the Silk Museum of Valencia has to be integrated in the network by ICOM because belonging to this organization will foster a better integration in many areas, specifically at global level. ICOM has 30 international committees regarding museums with a single topics in order to exchange knowledge and professional experience. I had chosen 7 committees which could be quite relevant for us, and 2 of them have been mentioned by the professor, and I was very glad to listen to that because I had thought about the International Committee for Museums and Collections of Costume. I had also thought about the International Committee for Museums, Collections and Decorative Arts and Design, the Committee of International Council of Museums devoted to ethnography, the one for Education and Cultural Action, and ICFA, Fine Arts, CIDOC, International Committee for Documentation, and also the Historic House Museums. And let me tell you about the reasons for those committees. And I'm very glad that Emma mentioned 2 committees which I had not mentioned right now. If we take into account the many options of analysis and study that can be carried out at the Valencia Silk Museum, I would like to highlight this last committee because this museum is really a house museum. As we understand the Silk Museum as a house museum, it means that we are saying that the guild area has been used during more than 5 centuries. and there had been meetings of the silk makers for centuries, and they still are meeting there. Within this building, this historical building, we have the testimony and the memories of the history and the present. We have Vicente Enguídanos, who is a silk weaver that is still working traditionally in silk making, and he is an evidence of everything that's been mentioning here. So we can include the concept of historic house museum, because this was a house, a building which had been turned into a museum and has to do with the silk makers of Valencia. Silk Museum in Valencia. There is a document from 1477, and this would be the oldest document in the Brotherhood of Saint Jerome. Municipal authorities ratified its foundation in 1479. So we are talking about an entity which is more than 5 centuries old, and it's still working as a trade association, specifically for textile makers. The Silk Art School, whose is the heir of the medieval guild of the silk weavers, is the owner of the building. After decades fighting to improve its conditions, this building has been restored. Due to its condition as a private entity, public institutions could not invest in the project. This restoration has been done thanks to the sponsorship of the Hortensia Herrero Foundation. Since its opening in 2016, we have this museum, and it is a very important part of the culture of our city.
The museum has 4 spaces: the permanent exhibition, the archive, the noble premises of the building, and the workshops which store textile materials illustrating the process of the Valencian fabric weaving, the brocade. It also has a shop called Espai Seda, which is open to visitors, and it also has a cafeteria and a restaurant with a terrace, which is located precisely where the former vegetable garden was. The halls host traveling exhibitions too, using silk as a connecting thread. Following successful exhibitions, such as the one for the film series clothing exhibition Isabel, or other exhibitions, in 2019, a spectacular, unprecedented exhibition of sacred silks coming from the Cathedral of Valencia and the Higher Church of Desamparados in Valencia. As we can see, the themes, the subjects of exhibitions are really witness to our reality in our region. Visitors per year are close to 50,000 visitors per year. But most likely, given the impact of the sacred garment exhibition, the number of visitors will probably double. The building of the Silk Art Museum. This is a prominent building in Valencian architecture. It is located in the Velluters district, the silk weavers district, very close to the museum. We find the magnificent Silk Exchange building, which is most representative of civil Gothic architecture in the Mediterranean, plus different buildings which were formerly the workshops of silk weavers. The building dates back to the 15th century. It has a Gothic plan, and it is tremendously rich art-wise, as it has numerous mural paintings, mosaics, and pictures. The floors are amazing, with the typical Valencian tiles. The Gothic staircase in the chapel coincides with the moment the silk exchange was built, as the staircase imitates the staircase in the silk exchange. The base preserves the tiles of the 15th century with the gilt symbols, the iron, the kata, the shuttle. The main players of silk at the time were silk weavers, traders, merchants, children, women, men, slaves, servants, masters, and apprentices. Foremen and families who devoted their lives to a number of crafts, including also farming and merchandising. A portion of that community was organized into brotherhoods and guilds as from the late 15th century. Thanks to historic research, those anonymous individuals are now given a voice, and their material legacy is valorized precisely at this very museum. With the refurbishment of the museum, a great portion of the city's history has been recovered, as the Guild of Silk Weavers has become a reference and a driver of Valencian economy. Many of you probably know or have seen these pictures, these images. Many of these images and photographs come from the building. But please note the surroundings, the environment, the context. We are very lucky to have quite a few remains from this time, from this architecture of the Gothic time and art in Valencia. The archive of the Silk School. It is one of the most important collections in Europe. It consists of 48 parchments, 660 books, and 97 boxes with documents dating back to the 15th century. It preserves records for expenses, debit and credit of the Brotherhood, and it also preserves other records for the Brotherhood up to the 19th century, including lists of masters, apprentices, and students registered, minutes of meeting, names of the brothers, and the foremen of the period. It also records foreign workers, festivities, deaths, inventories, plus the privilege of King Ferdinand of Aragon, dating back to 1479. Gone again. My presentation is gone. Well, as you can see, the pictures illustrate my text. When they are there, an exceptional document is the privilege of King Charles II of Spain, dating back to 1686. This document granted the Guild the title of School of Artists and the fact they could use the term art, silk art, which gave way to the actual name of the school. As from the 18th century, another term was added, arte mayor, higher art or fine art of silk, which was a title given at the time to braid and ribbon makers. The archive is a key piece in understanding the evolution of Valencian economy. The Silk Museum guards these very important records, these archives, which you can see on the screen. And since it was opened in 2016, it promotes activities such as exhibitions, lectures, seminars, conferences, institutional functions and receptions, book publishing, audiovisual showings, and specialized merchandising. The historical archive of the museum is a genuine legacy and jewel. There are numerous silk museums around the world in numerous cities, but none have these particular features as Valencia has. The archive, I'm referring to the archive. The archive is an excellent piece, an excellent component. Unfortunately enough, conditions are adequate for security and maintenance. The archive has allowed researchers to study splendorous moments in time in the history of Valencia, as proved by research conducted by Mr. Germán Navarro, a medieval specialist, or Ricardo Frank, specialized in modern times. Both historians are paramount references in the study of this particular archive, as many other researchers who continue producing discourses about these particular document and archive. The archive is a key component in understanding the Valencian economy as from the 15th century to date. Its condition as a corporate institution has provided great information to researchers in different disciplines, but above all, it helps us understand trade and social processes in Valencia from the 15th century as regard trade routes and trade agreements. We must continue this study and further it as it brings knowledge and dissemination. These are examples of documents found in the archive of the Silk Art School. Let me now describe our museum proposal, arranged into geographic areas. For the Silk Art Museum, we have put forward a proposal based on different realms: regional, national, global, bearing in mind the very features of audiences and viewers, their age, school visits and school outings are fundamental, the huge affluence of tourists and the gentrification process of the city, or the boost given by Las Fallas, our festivity. Please note that Fallas, our festivity in Valencia, which is a tourist must, and which, by the way, has been declared a UNESCO heritage site or event, well, this very peculiar fiesta and festivity is actually a perfect window for the fabrics, the cloth of the falleras women, which is totally in line with the legacy of silk and the history of silk. It also encourages the production of audiovisual materials. Thinking about potential repercussions and impacts in the media nationally and internationally, it would be adequate to foster and produce a TV series about Valencian silk. Let me give you a few ideas for the series. You could use for the location the School of Silk. We could also focus in that series on silk processes, the trade itself, silk weaving, the evolution of the silk weavers district, the silk exchange, the medieval splendor of the city, the Baroque style of 18th century Valencia, mulberry tree growing, silk farming, fashion in textiles, in Valencian clothing. All these ideas should be shaped or could be shaped into a television series and could be used for circulation and dissemination and should stay with us, with the specialists, instead of being done by alien bodies. All this should be visualized, should be made visible. So there you go. All these audiovisual projects should be given the go-ahead, supported by the Brotherhood of Silk and by the Silk Art School and Museum. Another subject I would like to deal with is the promotion of the visual industry with schools. This is actually highly in vogue. Cooperating with schools could be a good idea to produce audiovisual materials at this moment in time. From political educational levels, priority is given to connections between children and audiovisual production. Teachers from all educational levels are involved in encouraging audiovisual production, including actively both teachers and students. Why not launch an awareness campaign about silk as a cultural phenomenon from all such perspectives? Why not favor school productions of length films and short films about silk weaving, silk trading, and luxury textiles. I am absolutely convinced that this type of campaign would make links, would forge links with the Silk Museum and the Silk School, and could have great impact, audiovisually speaking, at different levels, given the very many initiatives that are there and are yet to be explored. The Silk Road as a school program favors new teaching strategies for museums and schools with direct benefits for specialized educators in the museum field. Let me point out, as regards museums, the trajectory of the University of Valencia and their educational role in training museum educators. Please note that with these qualifications, museum educator qualification, Avalent was born as an organization to validate a better discourse, improving relationships between schools and our museums. We could use as a platform specific elements in the archives, emphasizing graphic elements, particularly calligraphy. Writing calligraphy as an aesthetic element of great and fine beauty. In our rooms, in this room, we have a major high-statured calligrapher who is also a speaker in the conference. To launch this line of study, we could suggest titles such as Archival Texts, Images of Writing Splendor. In addition to studying the contents of the documents, which, by the way, has allowed us to study history and links with the economy, we could delve into the artistic and educational value of handwriting, and at once emphasizing another element, the visual element. The graphic value in writing, in calligraphy, is actually a way of building the gaze in a museum. The archive offers unique opportunities to try and explore this type of research. Can you imagine in a few months' time yourselves admiring with other museum visitors the graphic possibilities of written documents dating back to the 16th century, or the deeds we preserve in the archive from the 18th century? Wouldn't it be enriching for students in the design school for them to produce posters and art inspired in documents preserved in our archive? Would you imagine the many prospects offered by our documents to generate cooperation projects with teams in the Délicat de l'Image in France, or with universities in China or Japan? All this points to new gazes, new visions that are to be prompted and encouraged. That's why I would suggest the scientific committee and the brotherhood of the school could put forward initiatives that I'm sure will bear fruit. I cannot take much longer, but well, I did mention the book Migrant Heritage. You can read some of the excerpts I've touched on. But now I would like to reflect about reflection for innovation. The role to be played by a museum in its context and in relation to other institutions should be based on a serene reflection. The way to improve our surroundings requires a consistent speech, a consistent discourse, but one that also looks ahead into the future. A discussion is needed, a reflection is needed when we deal with heritage, as is the case today. We are accountable and we are to make important decisions. We should preserve the boost to continue making decisions that can contribute to making the Silk Museum becoming an international reference. Let me now move on to another topic which is very important in the museum, the generation of resources to stay independent. After 5 centuries of hard work, of difficult times, now we are to transmit the legacy in a very serious way, this requiring serious specialists. High statute specialist professionals are to contribute their views and create a good plan involving all factors and all relevant stakeholders. The museum has a scientific committee endorsed by the Silk Weavers Guild. The plan needs to be consistent and needs to foresee collaboration scenarios. Raymond, the singer, said, "If you lose your roots, you lose your identity." Raymond is a local singer, a Valencian singer. He was right. Our roots date back in time. Our roots shaped us the way we are, and that's why we cannot afford being oblivious of our roots. We shall not forget our roots or conceal them. Tradition needs to be made visible. At once, we are to innovate and be creative. Best innovations come from respect and remembrance. The Silk Museum can be an educational museum for all audiences, one that is sensitive to needs in each sector, a museum really committed to its context and environment. Technology and risky initiatives should be our playfield. The alphabet is still the most sophisticated technology. The same goes for silk textile productions. It is indeed a complex technology. If we value long-lasting traditions, rich traditions that produce rich fabrics, we should not lose heart when faced with new information and communication technologies that transform it all. We need to be positive. We need to be positively transformed, faced with new technological realities, faced with mobile technologies and instant transformation. Our attitude should be an open one and a sensible one. As we preserve the tradition of silk, we can forge direct connections with cutting-edge technologies. Oddly enough, the general use of technologies by all social strata causes us to become identified with most people. Everybody has the right to access culture and technology. Economic constraints should not become cultural constraints. We are accountable. We are compelled to bring our heritage to all citizens and to create identity in doing so. Cultural heritage belongs to all of us. Society needs to properly address this aspect, and we are in the perfect starting situation, the perfect starting point to turn the museum into a friendly, user-friendly and visitor-friendly area and space. Let me now briefly refer to a study about Silk Museum typologies. For us to adequately organize, well, in fact, I would recommend you the exhibition in the Silk Museum. The layout is in line with different museum typologies, which favors the creation of specific audiences. A first type would be that of museums that strengthen their past. Another typology is the one of museums that deal with the territory's strategic needs. The third is museums that have exhibitions on tradition and technologies.
Then we have sericulture museums. That would be the fourth. Fifth, museums regarding costumes mainly. Then sixth ones would be museums which foster education mainly. And then the last one, the seventh one, would be show museums that represent very powerful institutions. Those are the 7 different silk museums as we have established preparing this exhibition that you can visit now at the museum. We see that regarding the Valencian silk museum, we comply with many of the factors, but as with the rest of the examples, we have to highlight the features of each one of these cases. We have selected some institutions for this exhibition, and we wanted to focus on the Silk Road through the museums. We don't have all the world silk museums, but those which have been selected are all silk museums specifically, from an island in the west to an island in the east, a road between Europe and Asia that crosses all the traditional territories of the Silk Road. This road offers us a very wide environment with different features and specificities. The first museum we visit was El Paso Museum in Canarias, in La Palma Island. El Paso Silk Museum, located in San Miguel de la Palma Island, is a permanent exhibition devoted to the promotion of the sericulture and silk arts. It was opened in 2011 and it promotes the crafts of silks. It is a very friendly environment museum, and it shows how this craftsman has been developed in the island. The permanent exhibition and the workshop shows the specificities of how silk was manufactured. We now move to the sericulture station of Murcia. Silk production was one of the bases of the economy in the Murcia region in the 16th century, and we have an epidemic in 1850, and it ruined the activity, but it was recovered in 1892 through the sericulture station. They have to develop, to import, and to transmit the sericulture technology to increase productivity. In 1967, it was turned into the Institute for the Agriculture Research of Murcia and the Development. So in 1990, in 2000, we took all the material they have, and in 2006 they created a specific exhibition. In this station, silk is processed for biomaterials and biomedicine. We move now to France. I wanted to say that it seems that Lyon Museum, which was the most important silk museum in France, is recovering thanks to governmental funding. It's going to be open again. We are talking about 4 museums which are small but relevant nonetheless. We began with the Musée du Tissage. It was created in 1977 by Pierre Verschoot, and it was moved to its current location in 1998. There was an old manufacture facilities, and it was called Broad, and it was renovated with a unique collection. I would like to say, Sophie, thank you very much for all the materials you have provided us for the exhibition. Thank you for the images. Thank you for the text and everything that you have provided us with. Closer to the Valencian Museum, we have another case, which is Maison Rouge, which is a historical building as well. The Maison Rouge is a silk museum as well, and it is unique as its collection, and is the perfect scenery for silk textile. These four French museums are quite close to Lyon, just at the south of the city. This Maison Rouge offers different keys to understand this region. It is the combination of a workshop and a modern museum. It has wonderful collections inside. Also, it is quite austere outside. Rhythm Museographies, and it has they have libraries, lovely rooms, they have glass exhibitors, they have objects, they have furniture, they have many things there. They have a tea room, which is a small building designed in 1850 to host all the visitors in an atmosphere reminding them of the Far East, that is the origin of silk. Then we move to the Musée of Soie in Saint-Hippolyte-du-Fort. It was created in 1984. It was reopened in 2013 with a new management team, which is the Association of the Silk Museum of Saint-Hippolyte. We can see all the transformation from the silkworm to the silk textile. The visitor can see how from the silkworm to the silk moth. There are seeds, there are incubators, there are baskets, there are mulberry tree leaves, and also how they work on the illness, the main disease of the silkworms. The visit goes on through an area devoted to spinning, and they also have a workshop. Now let's move to the last French museum, the Musée of the la Soie de Tolleyan in France. It was created in 1985 by Pierre Lanson, who was coming from an old family of silk weavers. It is in 2001, the Tolleyan city buys the museum collection, and it takes it to next to the City Hall building. This is a medieval city. In the 19th century, Tolleyan was very rich thanks to the silk industry. In 1862, with 20 manufacture units, it was the main city of the region. We move now to the United Kingdom, Macclesfield Silk Museum. This museum is at the building of the School of Art, built in 1879. The collection includes the letter sent to Marianne Woodcock for the proposal of the museum, together with many textiles inspired by William Morris, and so on. The museum shows the properties of silk, how it is weaved, how it is dyed, and it shows textile by Maxfield and its different looms. There are several silk buttons from the 18th century which are very relevant. The silk maps, the parachutes that helped to win the Second World War, and also the loom used to create the famous silk pictures of Blockhart's Winston. Now we go to a Swedish museum, and there's a representative here today from this museum. August Algren was 16 years old when in 1822 began to work for Messer & Co. In that moment, the biggest silk manufacturer in Stockholm. He got ill, but he recovered in Montpellier, and he spent some time in Lyon as an apprentice. Algren learned and also got some jacquard mechanics to Sweden. Silk textile was an exception of the guild law in Sweden that would only offer jobs to men. In 1846, most of the silk factories in Sweden were employing women, and the factory was working till very recently, and they were working for the clergyman who was for the textile industry, and during the Second World War they had to stop because they couldn't import natural silk. Something to be highlighted about this museum, the Algren Sillenbarke Museum of Stockholm, it's the role as a working place for women and the example of the craftsmanship during the Industrial Revolution in Sweden. Now we move to some examples in Italy. Museo Didattico della Seta di Como, that was founded in 1985 by the initiative of individuals that wanted to recover the textile manufacturing units of silk in Como. They have bought and restored many industrial devices for silk production from 1850 to 1950. It has an archive, it has a research center, a library, and it has a storage room for the heritage, and mainly the permanent exhibition is devoted to the exhibition of textiles and silk products that show the perfection of the silk industry in Como. Museo del Settificio Piemontese, Fondazione Filatoio Rosso di Caraglio, also from Italy. Il Filatoio di Caraglio, the silk manufacturing unit oldest in Europe, was built between 1678 and 1678 by Giovanni Girolamo Galeani. It was a real silk industry working till 1930. They have industrial and traditional weaving. So in the same area we have the supply chain and the manipulation chain to get the wonderful silk thread. It's the first example of an industrialization much before the Industrial Revolution. In the decade in 1990, the European Council defined Filatoio as the historical cultural monument more relevant of the industrial archaeology in Piemonte. Since 2005, there have the industrial machines in which they use it for the famous organzino Piamontes. All the machinery were rebuilt from the models of the mid-18th century and were moved to its original location. We finish with Italy with the Civico Museo della Seta, Abeg, in Garlate, in Italy, in a country house from the 18th century with a mulberry orchard. The museum has exhibitions, inventions, and machines for silk production. It was opened in 1953 by the Swedish industryman Abeg. They wanted to show the different tools used for silk manufacturing. It has a section devoted to future in which it shows new applications and research for silk in cosmetics, biomedicine. There are labs, specific labs, and they also have some didactic and teaching itineraries. We move now to Lebanon. Bussus Silk Museum. It was founded by George and Alexander Azeili in an old factory. The museum is an important reference of the economic, cultural, and ecologic history of Lebanon. Nowadays, the Association Memory and Development is managing this museum. You can see the museum here on the slide before it was rebuilt. This is the current image. This eco-museum is a culture area, and there are always three elements: population, land, and time. Those elements relate the story of this land from its origins to nowadays. As you can see, it is very important. It highlights the idea of territory. But let's do not forget that Lebanon has been at war for so many centuries. We move now to Turkey. Turkey is also represented in our Congress. Here we have three representatives from Turkey, and I'm going to speak very briefly by the Merinos Textile and Silk Museum of Bursa, Turkey. Bursa is an important city, silk city, with textile production that goes back to the past and reaches our present. In the 15th century in Bursa, there were 1,000 silk spools. The silk production went until the mid-20th century. The municipality of Bursa has fostered the creation of works promoting design and textile production in Orali, Kaeles, Harmansik, Büyülohan, Inegol, and Mustafa Kemal Pasha. Please excuse my pronunciation of the different names, but I'm sure that our Turkish colleagues will give you a wonderful rendition of those names. The museum opened in 2013. They have more than 22,000 students and professors and teachers that visit them, and they tell them about the silk history, and they want to raise awareness in a socio-cultural sense. The center is managed by the Center of Production and Design of Silk, and you can see carpets and different textiles there. We move now to another country which is represented in this conference, Georgia. And we have there the State Silk Museum of Tbilisi. Founded in 1887, the National Silk Museum is one of the oldest silk museums in the world, and it's the only one in the Caucasian region. The museum is part of the Sericulture Caucasian Station, and it's a center of research and studies the silk manufacturing process in the whole Caucasus. The building was built by the Polish architect Alexander Sienkiewicz, and it is included in the list of the monumental heritage of Georgia. It has all kinds of objects related to sericulture. They have more than 15,000 objects and more than 20,000 books from 50 different countries. Artistic and scientific research and dissemination and preservation of the materials, all of them are crucial for the museum. The museum is open to new initiatives, and they have projects of contemporary art. They have artists, they carry out workshops and many educational activities. Now we go to the giant, to China. Only one museum we are talking about, and it is the National Silk Museum of Hansu in China, next to the lake. This is one of the first museums in China. It covers an area of 42,000 square meters and a building area of 23,000 square meters. It was opened in 1992. It took the effort of all the staff at the museum, and they have gone way beyond, and they got very important silk collections and also national exhibitions, and all of it joining both sericulture and silk production. They have educative programs, and they promote silk culture, and they are the founders of the International Association for the Study of Silk Textiles. Only 2 museums left now. We are getting closer to the island in which our journey will finish, which is Japan. But first we will visit South Korea through the Korea Silk Museum, Cheongwon-gun. This silk museum, it's very interesting, and it focuses on the Korean sericulture, focusing on education and children. During the different invasions by Hideyoshi, in Cheongwon had the Battle of Cheongju, and the Korean army regained the city facing the Japanese army. And the opening of the Chungbung line in 1926 created a boost in the economy of the region. Cheongju and Cheongwon-gun were separated in 1946. There was an international exchange with the many foreign cultures that reached there by the oasis from the Central Asia desert. It came from Siberia and also from the maritime routes, silk routes. As you can see, they have many educational options in this museum. You can see that in the slides. And then the last one, the end of our journey in Japan, in the Yokohama Silk Museum. In order to commemorate the centenary of the opening of the Yokohama harbor in March 1959, the Silk Center International Trade and Sightseeing Building was opened in the area of the British company Jardine Matheson & Co. In 1909, Japan became the biggest world export of raw silk. This industry contributed to the modernization of the country. The museum has many materials, and the public can access them and can see them. The silk demand is promoted, and it promotes also the tourism in Yokohama and Kanagawa. And as a conclusion, I wanted to tell you that contact between different people and civilization generates a common heritage that continuously moves, and it is there where the concept of movement, of growth, of cultural interaction becomes fundamental to talk about migrant heritage. And I'm quoting Navarro here. We cannot just think about museums obsessed with tourism or leisure, because in the short term they may work, but in the medium and long term they destroy any possibility of moving forward. We have to pay attention to the reality, to tourism and to leisure. But what we can do from our Silk Museum is to commit ourselves with the diverse realities, understanding its role from the social dimension. In this way, I'm paying attention to the three parameters we talked before: local, regional, and global sphere. We can get a modern museum because memory and history would support our proposal. History and memories will lead us to the future. Thank you very much.